I'm Lauren Blake. I'm 36, and I wasn't allowed to attend my own brother's engagement party because his fiancée said I made her uncomfortable. They toasted under string lights I paid for in a restaurant I built with a guest list I wasn't on. When I asked my mom, she said, "It's not personal, honey. It's Sierra's night. Let's not make things awkward." An hour later, Dylan marked my message as seen. No reply. So I opened my laptop, revoked their access to the POS system, downloaded every vendor contract, payroll receipt, and the $320,000 transfer from my savings. Then I called my lawyer. They wanted me gone quietly. Instead, I left a paper trail and a subpoena. They served cake. I served consequences. And if you've ever been erased by the people you built everything for, stay right here. You're not alone. I brought her coffee like I had every Friday for the past 5 years. But this time, she didn't even look up. The kitchen still smelled like vanilla creamer and toasted bagels. Oregon's midsummer sun seeped lazily through the blinds, casting golden lines across the tiled floor. I set the cup down beside her laptop, careful not to disrupt the color-coded seating chart she was hunched over. Brianna's fingers danced across the trackpad. Not a glance. Not a thank you. I cleared my throat. No whipped cream this time. I remembered. Still nothing. Mom sat across from her, arms folded, face tight, but trying to appear casual. She gave me a quick smile. Thin, polite, and then turned back to Brianna. You know, if we go with the vintage chairs from Caraway Events, they'll match the peony centerpieces better. That's the visual harmony your guests will remember. Brianna nodded solemnly. Aesthetic memory. Exactly. I stood there for a beat longer, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. No one did. I walked to the fridge and poured myself a glass of orange juice. Last Friday, when I asked about the guest list, Brianna said, "It's just a curated shortlist." She'd smiled then, too. Same smile I'd seen her use on waiters and salespeople. Back at the table, Mom pulled out her tablet, scrolling through photos of flower arrangements. We could do pale lilac runners down the aisle instead of white. It might feel more sophisticated. Oh, Brianna snapped her fingers. Did we book the quartet yet? I want them to play Debussy as the bridesmaids walk in. Still nothing about me. I leaned against the counter. So, invitations went out yet? Diane blinked. Brianna kept typing. Mom's voice got a touch too light. Well, they're mostly digital now, honey. It's not like the old days with paper and stamps. You know how it is. I watched her avoid my eyes. Brianna's lips twitched. I set my juice down. Just curious, I said evenly. Brianna finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, too clear. Didn't you once call weddings overpriced performance art? I stared at her. That wasn't an answer. That was a pretext. Mom let out a soft laugh that died in the air. Let's not make this awkward. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, thumb hesitating over the screen. A message from the family group chat lit up. Zach. Don't stress. Evan wasn't invited anyway. My chest tightened. I looked up slowly. Brianna had gone back to her laptop. Mom was chewing her lip, pretending not to notice. Outside, a lawnmower whirred somewhere down the street, a reminder that life moved on. Planned, pruned, curated. Just not for me. I picked up the coffee I had brought and dumped it down the sink. I read the message 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed the confirmation. Zach's words lingered in the family chat like poison ink. Don't stress. Evan wasn't invited anyway. I sat motionless at my desk, the only light in the apartment coming from my laptop screen. The quiet was stifling. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that feels like waiting for something awful to land. I opened my email, then the wedding folder. What started as a place to keep things organized had morphed into a paper trail of betrayal. $1,200, deposit for the Orchard House venue. $750, payment to Peony and Fern Florals. $2,100. DJ Serrato's full-day service. $3,860. The dress. I still remembered Brianna twirling in front of her webcam, asking me if it made her look timeless. $1,325. Printed invitations. I hadn't received one. $4,252. Miscellaneous costs, catering upgrades, crystal candle holders, aisle runner with their initials. Total, $13,487. Every payment made under my name. Every detail linked to my bank account. I hadn't just contributed. I had enabled the entire production. Out of habit more than emotion, I opened another folder. Past support. $600 for her dental work. $1,400 for the sublet when she moved out after a fight with Mom. $1,980 for the gym pass. Wedding glow-up, she called it. $3,200 to Zach for that stupid Ducati that never even ran properly. Never saw that money again. I wasn't keeping tabs before. Now it felt like uncovering a paper graveyard. The apartment around me, tidy, gray, impersonal. Wasn't a home. It was a pause button I'd been living in. "You're a blessing to this family, Evan," Mom once said. She'd said that right before asking if I could co-sign Brianna's car loan. That was the trick. Dress the request in praise so I wouldn't notice the hook. I hit Brianna's name on my phone. It rang twice, then dropped. No voicemail, no callback. Fine. I opened a blank folder on my desktop and titled it, "The Price of Family." One by one, I began dragging receipts into it. The list grew like a ledger of blind faith. It wasn't anger. It was inventory. Then another ping. Zach. If he shows up, I'll just ask Marcus to block him at the door. My jaw didn't clench. My eyes didn't even widen. It wasn't surprising. It was clarifying. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being erased. And they thought I'd just vanish quietly. Like always. Number I closed the folder. And in that silence, I began to draw new lines. Lines they would soon wish they hadn't crossed. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't even sigh. I just sent the first email. It was to the Orchard House. Subject line, contract cancellation request. Evan Brooks. I attached the signed agreement under my name and a copy of the transfer receipt. No explanation, just documentation. I moved on to peony and fern florals, same deal. Attach, submit, move on. The deposits were non-refundable, I knew that. But I wasn't asking for a refund. I was freezing everything. The DJ, Marcus, replied almost immediately. "Wait, hey Evan, I thought Brianna said this was all cleared? Is everything okay?" I paused, fingers hovering over the keys. Then I typed, "Contract is under my name. Please pause all work and communication until further notice." No warmth, no elaboration, just a clean slice. Behind me, soft jazz floated from my speakers, Chet Baker, muted trumpet notes filling the quiet like a secret. My office at home was dim except for the glow of dual monitors. One screen showed my banking portal. The other, a spreadsheet titled Wedding Ledger Active. Each row was an expense. Each column, a thread in the web I hadn't realized I was spinning. I heard the chime of a new email. Celeste Kim, photography. "Hi, Evan. Just saw your note come through about pausing services. I didn't realize you were Brianna's brother. She mentioned that everything was being handled by close family friends, not siblings. Let me know how you'd like to proceed." I stared at the screen, not angry, just observed. Close family friends. I clicked reply, attached the invoice, highlighted the signature line. "Hi, Celeste. I've been the financial point of contact from day one. Please direct any confirmations or changes to me directly. Appreciate your professionalism." It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a ledger being corrected. I opened my printer drawer and pulled out a ream of paper. One by one, I printed the invoices, then the email threads, then the receipts, then the group chat screenshots, Zach's message, Marcus's response, and the one from Alyssa that just said, "Yikes. Drama." The folder on my desk grew heavier by the minute. With every new sheet, something in me solidified. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about evidence. I labeled the folder with a Sharpie, documentation, wedding expenses. My phone buzzed. A new message, not in the group chat. "Zach, can we talk?" That was new. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because this time I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I reached for the next document, fed it into the scanner. The soft hum of the machine was the only sound in the room, and it felt, finally, like I was getting somewhere. "She told me your parents paid for everything," Zach said, his voice barely above the hiss of the espresso machine. "I thought you were barely involved." We sat across from each other in a dim corner of the cafe. It was the kind of place with chipped mugs and too many Edison bulbs. Cozy, anonymous, safe. A neutral zone. He looked like he hadn't slept. His jaw was tight, fingers fidgeting with the coffee sleeve. I noticed he hadn't touched his drink. He wasn't here to fight. He was here because something didn't add up. The silence between us stretched. I didn't fill it. I just reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Thick, weighty, organized. I laid it on the table and flipped it open. Receipts first. The dress. The florist. The DJ. The deposit for the venue. Then the agreements, signed, dated, under my name. Then the emails. Then the group chat screenshots. Then the spreadsheet. Zach leaned in, eyes scanning faster, then slower. His brows furrowed, then lifted, then knit again. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. This is over 13 grand. I nodded. "Why didn't you say anything?" I shrugged. "Because I thought it was for family. Because no one asked." He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaling a dry laugh. "She said it was all covered. That her parents insisted on paying. That you barely wanted to be involved." I let the words sit. Let the weight of the lie settle between us. He flipped through the folder again, more slowly this time. Stopped at a printed voicemail transcript. "What's this one? Play it." He pulled out his phone, scanned the QR code I'd attached to the top corner. The voice that came through was unmistakable. Brianna, sharp and casual. "Don't tell Evan. He still thinks he matters." Zach froze, blinked once, twice. Then he hit pause. The cafe felt suddenly colder. "This isn't revenge, is it?" he asked, looking at me, searching. "No," I said quietly. "It's math." He looked away, then down, then back at the folder, then at me. "I need to rethink everything." He didn't mean the folder. He meant her. I closed the folder slowly. "You should..." He nodded once, but didn't move. Just sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of distant conversation and the sharp smell of burnt espresso. The first crack had formed, and I hadn't even lifted a hammer. I wasn't planning to ruin her wedding. I was building something better. The idea came quietly, like most of the good ones do. Not out of rage, but from clarity. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to make a statement, the kind that doesn't need an invitation. I stood in the middle of my office, the same place that had been filled with invoices and resignation just a few nights ago. Now, it had transformed. String lights along the ceiling, tall arrangements of orchids and eucalyptus along the wall. A bar cart in the corner stocked with craft cocktails. A small, elegant sign near the door read, "Welcome." At the center, a screen, mounted, polished, ready. Celeste was the first to arrive. She stepped in with a soft smile, camera bag slung over her shoulder. "I brought the good lens," she said. "This feels like the calm before a very intentional storm." I smiled. Just a quiet celebration. She nodded, understanding more than she let on. Next came Marcus, a little sheepish. "Hey, man," he said. I told Brianna I had a scheduling conflict. Didn't say with what. Thanks for being here. He set up the speaker system in 10 minutes flat, tested the mics, then took a sparkling water and sat in the corner. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Chelsea arrived last. I hadn't expected her to say yes. She was a client from years ago. Therapy background, survivor of a brutal sibling legal dispute over a will. She knew the look of someone who'd been quietly discarded. I brought a friend, she said. Her name's Dignity. She travels light. I laughed. First time in weeks. There were only 9 of us total. No gowns, no tuxedos. But something in the air buzzed. Anticipation, maybe. Or clarity. The food was small plate Mediterranean. Lamb skewers, roasted vegetables. Hummus served in carved bowls. Simple, refined, clean. As everyone settled, I stepped forward. My palms weren't sweating. My chest wasn't tight. I'd rehearsed this, but I didn't need the script anymore. Thank you for being here tonight. I know you probably had other plans. Some of you were meant to be elsewhere. But I think you're exactly where you need to be. They watched me. This isn't a protest. It's not even a rebuttal. It's a reclaiming of time, of effort, of value. I tapped the laptop next to me. The presentation opened. First slide, a photo of the invoice list, arranged neatly. Second, a pie chart. Contributions to the event, with 84% labeled EB. Third, a waveform of Brianna's voicemail. He still thinks he matters. I looked out at the room. I do. Celeste lifted her camera. Marcus clicked a beat. Chelsea raised her glass, and I whispered just to myself, "You forgot me." But I remembered everything. I sat down, opened my streaming software. The interface blinked gently. Schedule broadcast? I clicked yes. A countdown appeared. 23 hours, 17 minutes. Not a wrecking ball, just a spotlight. And this time it would shine exactly where it belonged. Someone just unplugged the DJ, right in the middle of our first dance. Brianna's voice was sharp, cutting through the soft hum of confusion that had started to ripple through the barn. It was supposed to be a golden hour ceremony, the kind you see on Pinterest boards and bridal magazines. Warm sunlight slipping through open rafters, chiffon drapes swaying gently, string lights waiting to sparkle. But now, the heat clung to everything like a wet cloth, and the curated elegance had begun to wilt. Marcus had been missing all afternoon. They assumed he'd be late. Temperamental artists, right? But when the music finally started, it was from a dusty, preset playlist. Pop songs with no transitions, no announcements, no finesse. Halfway through the first dance, the music stuttered, then stopped. A groomsman leaned over and whispered something to the tech assistant. The assistant shrugged. No Marcus, no fix. Zach frowned. Did he confirm with you? He said he was locked in for the night, Brianna hissed. He literally said that, word for word. Diane, their mother, tried to smile. It's probably a mix-up, sweetheart. Let's focus on the cake. Maybe move that up while we figure this out. Except there was no cake. A frantic junior planner jogged over. The bakery said the final payment bounced and the invoice was closed this morning. They didn't deliver. They thought it was canceled. What? Brianna's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. No Celeste either, the planner added. I called. She said she was never formally booked. She's on another assignment. That's when Brianna started to spiral. This is sabotage, she muttered. Zach stepped closer. Or a series of misunderstandings. Brianna turned to him, voice lower now. You think I didn't handle this? That I didn't plan everything? Zach hesitated, just long enough to say too much. A group of bridesmaids huddled near the bar, scrolling on their phones. One of them gasped. Oh my God. She turned the screen outward. A live stream. Evan. Calm. Clear. He was speaking into a mic flanked by familiar faces. Marcus, Celeste, even that one accountant friend of his. On the screen, spreadsheets, payment receipts, itemized costs. And then, audio. Brianna's voice, unmistakable. Don't tell Evan. He still thinks he matters. A hush fell over the barn. Zach stared at the phone like it might burn through his hand. Tell me this was edited, he said, voice rising. Tell me this is fake. Right now. Brianna opened her mouth. No words came out. And the playlist looped to an old Avril Lavigne song no one wanted to hear. Your brother said he paid for the cake, and I believe him. The words landed like a slap across the vanity mirror. Zach stood at the edge of the bride's dressing room, the door half open behind him, light from the hallway casting a harsh line across his face. His tie was crooked, his knuckles white from gripping the edge of the makeup table. Brianna froze mid-touch-up. Her lipstick hovered just short of her mouth. What are you talking about? She asked, voice slow, calculated. Zach held up his phone, screen still lit with the paused live stream. Evan's voice echoed faintly through the speaker, clear, measured, devastating. I just watched a man calmly explain how he paid for the florist, the DJ, the dress, and yes, the cake, and then back it all up with receipts. Brianna tried to scoff, but it came out dry. You seriously think Evan's not just spinning this for attention? He had a folder, Bri. Zach snapped. A folder titled The Price of Family, with dates, contracts, voicemails across the room. Alyssa and Tori, two of Brianna's oldest friends, exchanged glances. Neither looked amused. Brianna pivoted. You've seen how jealous he can get. Always trying to be the victim. He doesn't want us to be happy. No, Alyssa interrupted gently. I remember you calling him an ATM once. I thought it was a joke, but now I'm not sure. Silence blanketed the room. Zach's jaw worked as if holding back something too sharp to say aloud. He finally stepped forward, placed the phone on the vanity beside Brianna's bridal clutch, and looked at her like he'd never seen her before. You lied to me, he said. You told me your parents paid for everything, that Evan barely contributed, that he didn't care. Brianna crossed her arms. I didn't lie. I managed things. He offered help and No, you omitted the truth. You let me build this life with you on a foundation of half-truths and favors you never paid back. Her voice raised a pitch. So what now? You're just going to walk away? I'm going to walk into the truth, Zach replied. And you should too. He reached for the ring box in his jacket pocket, opened it, closed it, then placed it quietly on the vanity. I'm not saying this because I want to hurt you. I'm saying it because I can't marry someone who thinks deception is a wedding gift. He turned to leave. And behind him, Brianna finally broke her stillness, whispering, Don't do this, Zach. Not like this. But Zach didn't look back. The ring sat in the glow of the vanity light, small and final. For the first time, my name is trending online, and not because I did something wrong. Sunlight poured through the glass walls of my office, washing everything in sharp clarity. My phone buzzed nonstop, notifications flashing like a heartbeat I hadn't expected to hear again. 2,143 shares, over 6,000 likes, a few hundred reposts with comments like, he didn't rage. He turned the lights on. They were talking about my live stream. I leaned back in my chair, watching the numbers rise. This wasn't viral in the flashy, chaotic way most things exploded online. It was something quieter, heavier, like justice echoing in a digital cathedral. A new comment popped up from someone named Chelsea V. My family cut me off when I couldn't afford to help pay for my brother's wedding. Watching this felt like healing. I paused, then clicked on her profile. A single mom, recent posts about starting over, one photo with the caption, I survived what they said I couldn't. Another message slid into my inbox. This one from Marcus, the DJ Brianna had insisted on booking. Marcus, hey, just saw the stream. I didn't know. Look, I'm out if you ever need a favor. Seriously, no charge. I stared at the message for a second before replying, "Appreciate it. I remember who showed up, Marcus." A notification pinged. Celeste, the photographer, had shared the video with the caption, "Sometimes you shoot weddings. Sometimes you witness awakenings." I smiled, not because I was happy, but because the truth, so long ignored, was finally doing its job. Then came the email from the Undone podcast, a show known for unpacking stories of quiet rebellion and family scars. Subject: "We'd love to have you on. Your voice matters." 10 minutes later, a headline popped up on my feed. "Funded by the Forgotten when family betrayal goes viral." That was me. And just when I thought the waves might calm, my screen lit up again. "Mom, you've made your point. Let's not take this any further." I stared at the message. "No, sorry. No, I didn't know." Just an attempt to close the book, without ever reading the chapters. But this wasn't revenge. This was the archive. And the world had finally opened the file. "You think this is about a party? Try 20 years of pretending." The cafe was nearly empty. Just the low hum of a fridge and the soft clinking of cups being washed behind the counter. I spotted her by the window, a scarf draped over her shoulders like armor. My mother hadn't changed much. Still poised, still rehearsed. But the way her fingers gripped the coffee cup betrayed the nerves she wouldn't admit. "Evan," she said, standing halfway, unsure if this was a hug situation. I nodded and took the seat opposite her. The pause stretched. "Thank you for coming," she began. "I know this has escalated." Escalated. That's what she called thousands of shares, podcast invites, and text messages from strangers thanking me for saying what they never could. "I thought we could talk. Just you and me. No articles. No posts." I looked out the window. "Then why now?" Her voice softened. "Because you're my son. And this vendetta, it's hurting everyone. Including you." I almost laughed. "Hurting me or just inconvenient?" She blinked, caught off guard. "You told me once," I said, "that families fight but we forgive." She nodded, relieved I remembered. "And yet," I continued, "not once did you ask if I felt betrayed. Not when I paid Brianna's tuition. Not when I was told to sit in the back at Dad's retirement dinner. Not even when you asked me to co-sign her car loan the week after I got laid off. Evan, I didn't know." "No," I cut in. "You didn't ask." She tried another tactic. "Look, we've all made mistakes, but taking this public, humiliating your sister, is that who you want to be?" I leaned forward. "You raised someone who gave and never got a thank you. And now that person has finally spoken, and you're uncomfortable." The silence between us was taut. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to build something of my own," I said. "And I want your silence. The same silence you gave me every time I was forgotten." She looked away. I stood, placed a few bills on the table. "For the coffee," I said. "This one's on me, just like last time." Then I walked out, leaving behind more than just a receipt. They say revenge is sweet, but silence is sweeter. The brushed metal plaque caught the sun just right. Brooks and Company. Consulting. I stood outside the glass-paneled office, a single breath hanging in the late morning air. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. No applause. Just the sound of a door unlocking, a new chapter beginning. The space was modest. White walls, 2 desks, 1 coffee machine humming with quiet efficiency. It didn't need grandeur. It needed intention. Marcus arrived first. "Place looks sharp," he said, placing a small houseplant on the reception counter. "And quiet. Like you." "Perfect," I replied. Celeste followed, her camera slung over one shoulder, already scouting lighting angles. "Don't you dare ask me to shoot headshots," she teased, but her eyes were warm. She had become something of an anchor through all of this, one that asked for nothing, gave everything. Then came Chelsea, the first client. We shook hands across a desk still smelling faintly of varnish. Her file was thin, but her voice was steady. "I was the Evan in my family," she said. "Now I want to build something that doesn't require permission." We signed the contract over black coffee and nods of understanding. By 3 p.m., the inbox pinged. A message from the Unsaid podcast. Subject: interview request. Building from betrayal. I let it sit unread for a while. Instead, I turned to the window. Downtown bustled below, but the reflection staring back was still. Steady, unrecognizable from the man who once delivered coffee every Friday like a ritual of worthiness. Taped to the edge of the window, nearly invisible unless you knew to look, was a scrap of paper. Funded by the forgotten. It wasn't spite. It was a blueprint. The phone buzzed. One new message. "Zach, you saved me." I didn't reply. Some things don't need an answer. Some victories are loud. Mine? Whispered, but permanent. The wedding cake was never cut. The truth got sliced first. The rooftop was quieter now. The last of the wine glasses clinked into bins and soft jazz hummed through the speakers. Evan stood near the railing, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, talking softly to Chelsea and Celeste as the evening wrapped itself in gold. Then came the slam. The elevator doors burst open. Brianna. She didn't belong here. Not with her smudged eyeliner, trembling hands, and dress that screamed formality in a space built on rawness. Everyone paused. Celeste instinctively stepped aside, shielding her camera like this was a crime scene. Marcus froze by the bar. Evan didn't move. "You humiliated me," Brianna said, her voice shaking but loud enough for the rooftop to fall silent. Evan turned to face her. "No," he said evenly. "I let the truth walk beside me. You were the one trying to keep it locked in the basement." She blinked rapidly. "You made me look like a fraud in front of hundreds of people. You made yourself that long before I ever pressed stream." She advanced. "I was your sister." Evan didn't flinch. "And I was your safety net." There was a pause. Long, cold, necessary. Evan nodded once to Marcus, who tapped his tablet. The speakers shifted. Then her mother's voice played. Diane, brittle and clipped. "Evan's never been more than a burden. We do what we must to keep things stable." The sound echoed across the rooftop like a slap. Brianna staggered back. "She said that?" Evan didn't reply. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned away, then back. "Has anyone ever really loved me?" she whispered. "Or has it all been some kind of lie we agreed to keep telling?" No one answered, because some questions aren't asked for answers. They're confessions in disguise. Celeste lowered her camera. Evan turned back toward the railing, and the silence wrapped around them. Not victorious, not cruel. Just real. She came to ruin me. She left asking for forgiveness. The rooftop had emptied, save for a few glasses abandoned like ghosts. The wind carried the first hint of dawn. Soft lavender light brushing the skyline. Marcus had packed up the last of the sound equipment, nodding briefly at Evan before heading for the elevator. But Brianna lingered. She stood barefoot now, heels long discarded, mascara dried into streaks. Her voice, when it came, didn't rise above the breeze. "I took your name off the RSVP list." Evan said nothing. His hands rested on the rail, knuckles calm. "I told them it was an accident," she added, staring at the city below. "It wasn't. I didn't want you there. Not because I hated you. Because I hated what you reminded me of." Still, silence. Brianna stepped closer. "Diane, Mom, she didn't want me to tell people you helped. She said it made me look dependent, weak." No response. "I lied because it was easier. I took credit for the florist, the caterer, the playlist. I let everyone think I orchestrated a miracle. But it was just you, working quietly in the background. Again." The wind shifted, tousling Evan's hair. He didn't flinch. Brianna wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. I thought you'd lash out, that you'd scream or ruin it with some post or angry message. But you didn't. You just let the lights flick on. She exhaled slowly. I thought you were the safest person to betray. You'd never make it hurt. That was the wound, not the money, not the exclusion, but the presumption that his silence made him disposable. Evan finally turned, his eyes steady, not cold. Just finished. I forgive you, he said quietly. But I remember everything. He didn't wait for her reply. He simply walked past her, shoulders light, footsteps even. From somewhere inside his jacket, his phone buzzed. A podcast producer's name flashed across the screen. He didn't check it. For once, he didn't need another platform to speak. The truth had already done its work. Behind him, Brianna sat on a bench, elbows on her knees, staring at her open palms. And the sun rose anyway. You can bury the truth in silk and rose petals, but roots break through. The story didn't belong to Evan anymore. It belonged to the world now. By mid-morning, the hashtag #Forgotten Funded was trending in 3 countries. Screenshots of Evan's receipts, the live stream clips, and his whispered quote, "You forgot me. I remembered everything," had become digital mantras, memes, TikToks, think pieces. Celeste posted a single image. Evan standing before a projector, the soft light washing over his face. Caption, "Some people burn bridges. Others build beacons." It went viral in 4 hours. BuzzFeed ran with, "Brother pays for sister's $13,000 wedding, gets erased, then tells the internet." Podcast dissected every second of the stream. One producer played a slowed-down version of Diane's leaked voicemail, the one where she called Evan a burden, but a convenient one. The audio clip alone had over 1.6 million streams. Talk shows invited experts to weigh in: financial abuse within families, weaponized gratitude, the emotional economy of sibling favoritism. Some hosts praised Evan's restraint. Others asked if the public shaming had gone too far. But the consensus? The silence had been louder than a scandal. Meanwhile, Brianna's floral consulting brand hemorrhaged clients. Sponsors withdrew. One boutique posted, "We believe in honesty. We've ended our collaboration with Redacted effective immediately." A think piece titled "Invisible Labor and the Brothers Who Pay" went live on The Atlantic by noon. And through it all, Evan didn't speak. He didn't comment, didn't like, didn't repost, didn't even log in. At 4:12 p.m., he opened his laptop, navigated to his account, and clicked delete profile. No farewell message, no explanation. Just, "Are you sure?" "Yes." The screen went blank, and Evan leaned back in his chair. Outside his office window, the sun was dipping low, scattering amber across the skyline. Celeste had texted him an hour ago. "Want to talk?" He hadn't responded, because there was nothing more to say. The world had witnessed it all, and Evan had already exited the stage. I didn't walk away because I lost. I walked away because I won. The words echoed in Evan's mind as he unlocked the door to his new apartment. No furniture, no wall art. Just him, the keys, and a soft click of the door behind him. Outside, the city was recovering from the whirlwind his story had caused. But in here, everything was still. He dropped his duffel bag onto the hardwood floor. A single mattress leaned against the far wall. 2 cardboard boxes marked "Keep" and "Maybe." A smaller one simply read, "Passed." He stood in the center of the room and exhaled deeply. The silence was not empty. It was earned. His phone buzzed. A new voicemail. It was from Ethan, his childhood best friend who had moved away years ago. Evan hadn't heard from him in over a decade. "Man, I saw the podcast clip. Took me a second to realize it was you. You did it. Anyway, if you ever want to catch up, I'm here. Proud of you." Evan replayed the message twice. He didn't save it, but he didn't delete it either. Later that evening, Celeste stopped by. She brought 2 cups of black coffee, no cream, no sugar. "You're really going minimal this time, huh?" she said, eyeing the empty walls. "I figured I'd leave space for what's next." She nodded. "You know the article's going viral again, right? The headline's getting picked up overseas." "I stopped checking," Evan said. She pulled out her phone anyway, flashing the headline for him. "Silent Justice, the man who took down a wedding without saying a word." Evan gave a half smile. "They make it sound more dramatic than it was." "No," Celeste said gently. "They don't." They sat quietly. No noise but the hum of the radiator kicking on. Evan eventually walked to the small desk by the window. He pulled out a sheet of paper and started writing. "Ethan, thanks for your message. I chose truth over tradition. Not because it was easy, but because I was tired of shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. They called me a burden when I stopped giving. But silence, I've learned, is its own kind of clarity. I hope you're well. Maybe we'll talk soon." He folded the letter and tucked it into the keep box. The sun had dipped below the skyline. Streetlights flickered on one by one. Celeste rose to leave. At the door, she paused. "You done?" she asked. Evan looked around at the space, at the future waiting to be filled. "Yeah," he said. "Time to start something new." It started with an invitation I never received. It ends with one I created. The bookstore was smaller than Evan expected, with shelves that leaned slightly like tired shoulders and windows that framed the drizzle outside. Still, every chair was filled. A soft hush settled over the room as the final reader left the signing table, clutching their copy of The Invisible Brother like it held more than paper and ink. He clicked his pen shut, glancing up at Celeste, who stood by the refreshments table, sipping coffee. Her nod was subtle, warm. She had seen him through all of it, quietly, steadily. A murmur rippled through the small crowd when someone entered. Zach. He walked slowly, eyes downcast. Evan didn't stand. He waited. Zach stopped at the table. "Wish I'd asked more questions," he said quietly. Evan nodded once. "It wasn't your job to know. It was mine to tell." There was no handshake, just understanding. Zach turned and left without taking a book. Then came the next reader. "I just wanted to say," she said, voice trembling slightly, "you put into words what so many of us have carried for years." "Thank you," Evan smiled. Not the kind that stretches lips, but the kind that lifts something internal. "I wrote it for all of us." As the line dwindled, a woman with silver-streaked hair approached. Her name tag read, Margot, Bridge Foundation. "I run a nonprofit for estranged siblings and adult children," she said. "We host retreats, story circles, healing programs. Your book, it's going to resonate. We'd love for you to share your voice." Evan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the table beside him where a worn black RSVP card still sat. The one Brianna never sent. The one that had started it all. He picked up the card and tucked it into his notebook. At home that night, he sat by the window of his quiet apartment. The bookshelf held one copy of his debut. The rest had been given away. He opened a fresh journal. The first page was blank. The pen hovered. He wrote, "This time I won't disappear." The drizzle became rain. The city lights flickered on, and Evan Brooks began a new story. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be heard. They just need to be shown. The house didn't have many photos. No framed wedding shots, no family portraits crowding the hallway. Just clean walls, soft light, and the quiet hum of a coffee maker that now served more friends than family. It was Chelsea who noticed first. She stood near the window, mug in hand, looking at the empty space above the fireplace. "You're not going to hang anything up?" Evan looked up from his laptop. "Maybe later." She didn't press. She didn't need to. Some spaces were meant to breathe before being filled. Brooks and Company Consulting had grown, not in size but in reach. 3 clients had turned into 12, then 20. The kind of people who came in not just with projects, but with stories. Estranged siblings, quietly exploited daughters, men who hadn't spoken to their fathers in decades, finally asking, "Was I ever enough?" Evan listened, helped them organize not just their finances, but their silence, their grief, their need to rebuild. Celeste started dropping by once a week, camera in hand. She called it archival healing, capturing quiet moments of reclaiming. One shot of Evan, sitting with a client in a sunlit corner, ended up in an online photo series, What Survival Looks Like. He didn't expect it to go viral. Again. One afternoon, Chelsea brought over a binder, neatly labeled, color-coded, like Evan's old spreadsheets. "It's a nonprofit idea," she said, "for people like us." The title on the cover, "The Silent Kind." Support for those navigating family betrayal, with resources, retreats, and peer mentoring. Evan flipped through it. "This is solid." She smiled. "I learned from the best." They co-founded it 6 weeks later, Chelsea as executive director, Evan as advisory lead. The press came, but he turned down every interview. Let Chelsea speak. Let the clients share. He preferred the background now. One evening, Celeste lingered after an event. They stood by the old bookshelf Evan finally agreed to let her decorate. "You know," she said, "you never told me what you want this place to become." Evan looked around. "A map," he said, "for people who were erased but didn't vanish." And for the first time, he reached for a photo, an old one from childhood. He set it face down in the bottom drawer of his desk, not to display it, just to say, "It happened." But it's not the ending. The envelope was ivory, thick with a linen texture. No return address, no logo, just his name handwritten in soft blue ink, Evan Brooks. It arrived on a Thursday. Inside, a wedding invitation. Not Brianna's, not Zach's. Someone Evan barely remembered. An old friend from high school who had seen the live stream, read the articles, and decided to reach out. "You helped me walk away from a family that made me feel small," she'd written in the RSVP card. "Now I'm building something that feels real. I'd be honored if you came." Evan didn't go, but he did write back. "Thank you for remembering the invisible." He folded the note and slipped it into his own file. A new one, labeled Stories We Keep. The bookstore event had been 6 months ago. The office had doubled in size. The nonprofit had launched 3 city circles. And Evan? Evan had learned how to stay quiet without being silent. He no longer looked at old voicemails. He no longer needed receipts. The world had seen, heard, understood. That was enough. One evening, he found himself back at the Orchard House, the venue he'd once paid for, then canceled. It had been rebranded, painted in muted grays and forest greens. The new owners had no idea who he was. He didn't go inside. Just stood on the gravel path, watching a new couple hang lanterns in the courtyard. Their laughter floated into the dusk like something fragile and brave. Evan smiled, then walked away. At home, he opened a clean journal, not to write about the past, but about the project ahead. On the first page, he wrote, "They asked me to vanish. Instead, I became the lighthouse." And somewhere in the world, someone else, unseen, unheard, unbelieved, was opening their laptop, searching for proof that they weren't alone. They'd find it. Because Evan had left the light on. The wedding cake was never cut. But the truth was, in the end, it wasn't Evan's voice that shattered the illusion. It was the evidence. Quiet. Measured. Unapologetic. The brother they thought would fade away instead became a mirror none of them wanted to look into. While the chandelier lights dimmed over an empty dance floor, the world lit up with a story no one saw coming. What began as exclusion turned into revelation. And what they meant to bury behind curated smiles and silence became the blueprint for a new kind of justice. One written not in anger, but in receipts and restraint. Evan didn't yell. He didn't beg. He simply revealed. And that was enough. Because sometimes the loudest form of revenge isn't destruction, it's clarity. Families may share blood, but not always truth. And when truth is twisted long enough, even love begins to look like a leash. This was never about a party. It was about a pattern. The gaslighting, the favoritism, the conditional kindness masked as obligation. Evan didn't burn bridges. He mapped where they led and chose another direction. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. And when it echoes through the right hands, it becomes more than vindication. It becomes blueprint. It becomes voice. This isn't just Evan's story. It's every story that was buried under the weight of "don't make it awkward," or "let's not talk about that now." It's for every person who paid in silence, who gave too much and asked too little. For every quiet sibling, overlooked child, or scapegoated relative who wonders if anyone else notices. The answer is yes. Someone does. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. Because healing doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it looks like walking away, calm, whole, and uninvited. And in a world that rewards noise, never underestimate the legacy of a man who chose documentation over drama. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. The next time they say, "It's not personal," remember? It always is. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share with someone who needs to hear this, subscribe for more true life stories, and tell us in the comments, type 1 if this hit close to home. Type 2 if you think it could have gone differently.